We know the story of Titanic's maiden voyage well, but I'm sure there are some details you might have missed. Oh good god, I'm sounding like one of those soulless clickbait channels. Yeah, I don't like doing that. I prefer to approach things honestly. Just because the Titanic is famous doesn't make it a commodity. So now we're looking at the events of the voyage before we move on to the sinking. Titanic arrived at Southampton on 4th of April, giving them 6 days to stock the ship and for passengers to arrive. The dock at Southampton was deliberately made deep enough to accommodate the larger ships by the White Star Line. It was decided for all White Star Line voyages to depart on a Wednesday in order to pursue a weekly routine of crossings. Passengers embarking at Southampton arrived as early as 9:30 a.m. before her noon departure. While first and second class passengers were able to board as soon as they arrived, providing they had tickets, third class passengers had to go through health inspections before they were allowed to board. This would include inspections for lice and measles to prevent outbreaks during the voyage. Anyone found unhealthy would be turned away. First class had the privilege of being introduced to Captain Smith before a steward showed them to their cabins. Some steerage passengers who had gone for a pint before embarking and stayed 5 minutes too long weren't able to board. 2 crew members, W. Dawes and Peter Ettlinger, were dismissed before the Titanic sailed. Little did they know their lives were being saved. 2 trains would pull up from London near the dock so the passengers could embark as soon as they arrived. One train arrived at 11:30 a.m, giving the passengers only half an hour to get on board. The ship didn't have a large crowd seeing the departure, as we see in some of the films. The thing about Titanic is that no one cared about her until she sank, much like how no one cared about the Mona Lisa until it was stolen. In the Southampton photographs of Titanic, you see several ocean liners docked nearby. This was owing to the after effects of the coal miners' strike that had only just finished. At 12 o'clock, the ship was released from her moorings and drifted away from the port. As she passed by the docked ships, crew members and passengers heard what sounded like gunshots. In truth, it was the sound of cable snapping on the SS New York, owing to the turbulent wash in the Titanic's wake. A collision with the New York was barely avoided with the quick thinking of Captain Smith, and tugboats in the harbour pulling the New York away in time. The departure stopped for half an hour to check everything was safe before departing properly this time. The harbour of Cherbourg-Octeville received the Titanic in the evening of the 10th of April. She made her way around the sea wall but was too big to pull into a pier. The Nomadic and the Traffic were tenders that saw passengers and mail and cargo aboard the ship. Some of the passengers disembarked here, including the Countess of Roth's parents. One first-class passenger is rumoured to have disembarked out of suspicion that the near collision in Southampton was a bad omen, but who they were isn't certain. First-class passengers embarking at Cherbourg had dinner in their cabins. Titanic left Cherbourg at dusk and headed northwest towards the coast of Ireland. On the 11th of April 1912, the second day of Titanic's voyage dawned. In the early morning she performed some manoeuvres to test how she could turn. At 10 a.m. she arrived in Ireland and stopped off the coast of Queenstown. Titanic did not come into port there either, as she didn't have the time to turn around. The America and the Ireland were 2 tenders that brought the passengers aboard there. Roughly 7 passengers disembarked here, including Francis Brown, a priest in training, who took the only surviving photographs of the Titanic during the voyage. And Mr. John Coffey was meant to be a fireman on the Titanic, but at Queenstown he deserted, rather than leave with authorisation. His motives are unclear. He was likely to have died in the sinking had he stayed. Many Irish passengers were said to have cried as they stood on the stern, watching their homeland get further away. Hymns were sung, and third-class passenger Eugene Patrick Daly played the uilleann pipes. They are a type of bagpipes that are only played with the fingers, highly associated with Irish culture. This would have been a sad, haunting and, in retrospect, foreboding scene as the Titanic pulled away from land for the final time. Eugene Daly himself survived the sinking, but so many of those who stood with him wouldn't. He lost his pipes and claimed $50 for them, though some uilleann pipes were recovered from the sea. The following 2 days on Titanic was seemingly not unlike any other voyage. At noon on the 12th of April, the Titanic had been noted to have travelled nearly 790 kilometres. This was without lighting all of her boilers, but the fact that she was travelling her intended speed without lighting all the boilers was a talking point, even among passengers. It was popular for those travelling in first class to place bets as to how far a ship would travel in a day, so knowledge that the ship could go faster than planned was of great interest. A passenger, who hasn't been named, recalled overhearing Bruce Ismay and Captain Smith discussing lighting the rest of the boilers, something we'll come to when we're looking at the rankings. At noon on the 13th of April, Titanic was noted to have travelled 835 kilometres since the previous day. This was because they had gradually started to light more boilers, but not all of them were lit. Speculation circled among passengers if they would arrive in New York earlier than planned. A coal fire in a bunker near Boiler Room 6 was eventually put out. It had been smouldering since Belfast and had resulted in redistributing coal from the starboard side to the port bunkers. This caused the ship to list 3 degrees to the port side. The story of the coal bunker fire has stoked, no pun intended, controversy over the years. The fire started due to spontaneous combustion due to the constant friction and heat that caused coal to smoulder. Along with redistributing coal, a water hose was poured onto the coals to stop the fire. Fireman Frederick Barrett saw that the watertight bulkhead separating Boiler Room 5 and 6 was warped with 2 dents, sticking in different directions. The fire was not an out-of-control raging inferno because of a lack of oxygen. This means that the coal did not burn over 400 degrees Celsius, and while hot enough to warp metal, it's not enough to weaken it. The flooding of Boiler Room 5 during the sinking was caused by the doors to the coal bunker not being watertight. So when the iceberg breached 2 feet into the coal bunker, there was nothing to hold the water back. The photograph where people claim you see a burn mark on the hull is several feet away from the actual location of the fire, and the mark is likely a camera smudge or a reflection. It was also on the 13th of April that the Marconi wireless radio broke at around 11 p.m. The regulation for the operators was not to tamper with the machine and have it looked at when the ship docked. However, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride decided they could fix the machine themselves. It wasn't until 4:30 a.m. that they were able to fix the machine and have it operating again. Titanic's final dawn. Church services were held throughout the ship. Catholic services were held in 2nd and 3rd class, while 1st class only had a Protestant service. Of all the hymns that could have been sung that morning, the one remembered best is Eternal Father Strong to Save, which, at the end of the first 2 verses, says, "O hear us when we cry to thee, for those in peril on the sea."
Too soon? Yeah, Dean, I'm pretty sure.
110 years.
It's just too soon.
From 5 a.m. that morning, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride had been working to clear a backlog of messages from the purser's office, as well as sending ice warnings to the bridge. The first one being from the Coronia. Jack Phillips, the head operator, got very little sleep. A lifeboat drill was scheduled for Sunday morning, but it was cancelled in order to save the inconvenience to the passengers, as well as to keep the boilers going as they were still being broken in. The state of the sea when Titanic sank is also another important factor in her sinking. Rather than the rolling waves we come to expect from the Atlantic Ocean, the good weather that she had been afforded throughout the journey meant the sea more resembled a lake. Ideal conditions for sailing, yes, especially for anyone who suffers from seasickness. However, as Titanic would find out, it was dangerous. Should there be any icebergs, they would not be easily given away by waves breaking against them. According to Samuel Halpern, when the sea is so calm it reflects the stars clearly. It means there is pack ice nearby, but this was not known in 1912. Not to mention the fact that there was no moon that night. Even a half moon might have helped light the way. Captain Smith told Charles Lightoller, who was on bridge duty at the time, to notify him if conditions changed. Lightoller was relieved of watch duty at 10 p.m. by William Murdoch. The final ice warning came at around 11 p.m. from the Californian, saying that they had stopped for the night in an ice field due to their proximity to the ship. The sudden noise made Jack Phillips rip off his headset. Overtired and overworked, he responded to them in Morse code saying, "Keep out, shut up, I am working Cape Race." The operator on the Californian waited a few more minutes before turning the wireless machine off and going to bed. The majority of occupants on the Titanic had gone to bed by 11 p.m, save for late-night card games in the first-class smoking room and crew members on duty. Lookouts Reginald Lee and Frederick Fleet were on duty in the crow's nest. They didn't have binoculars with them, owing to the last-minute rearranging of the officers before the voyage, which saw the original second officer, David Blair, take the key for the lookout's binoculars with him by accident. While the binoculars would have been ideal, it would not have prevented a collision, as binoculars were only used to confirm a sighting. But it does hint towards how unprepared they were for what was to come. At At 11:30, Fleet and Lee noticed there was a haze on the horizon. This phenomenon is known as a cold water mirage, which makes someone see the horizon higher than it should be. As such, anything further away is impossible to see. The Titanic had travelled south further than usual to avoid pack ice, but the warmer air of the south meeting the near freezing ocean of the north caused the mirage. It would be 9 minutes before Fleet and Lee saw an ominously black object in the water that didn't reflect starlight. Some testimonies claim that Murdoch also saw the iceberg at the same time and ordered a harder starboard before the phone call from the crow's nest came saying iceberg right ahead. Harder starboard meant turning the tiller of the Titanic using the wheel all the way to the left until it was hard over, so she would turn left. This is different to how ships are turned now. Murdoch also sent the full astern order to the engine room. A stoplight was sent down to the boiler rooms, which would shut all the coal dampers, but the order wasn't acted on in time. The Titanic simply wasn't built to make such a quick turn. They had only 37 seconds before the sighting and impact. It initially seemed that they were just barely going to pass by, but everyone knows that icebergs are so much bigger under the surface. It grazed the hull of the ship below the waterline and opened 5 compartments, along with the merest slither of a 6th. For years it was believed that the iceberg caused a mighty gash along the side. However, it was later discovered that the impact caused rivets to pop out of place. Murdoch ordered a harder port immediately after the impact so the stern wouldn't be hit as well. Afterwards he closed the watertight doors and told Officer Moody to note the time and enter it in the log. At that point Captain Smith came on the bridge and asked what happened. He would summon Thomas Andrews to assess the damage, details of which I will get into in the next part, but they would ultimately uncover the fact that the Titanic was going to sink that night. Hey guys, thanks for sitting with me through this brief but honest look into what happened during Titanic's maiden voyage. If you think there are some details that are missing, that's because I'm saving quite a few of them for the 50 Famous Faces of Titanic, which will be coming out after I've finished the history videos and while I'm putting the rankings up. So if you see any details missing either here or when I'm covering the sinking, that's because I'm saving it for the 50 Famous Faces. Anyway, yes, next time we're going to be looking at the sinking, and hopefully that will be out by the end of March. Afterwards I will post a compilation video to watch at your leisure, though I might put them all into a compilation anyway and put these smaller videos into an unlisted category. But if you did like the video, please make sure you like, share and subscribe, and if you want to make sure you see all the ranking videos I'm going to be making about the Titanic, make sure you hit that bell icon too. And a big thank you to my patrons who have been helping me through this, especially Anastasia Gracia and Alison Cuff and Larissa. Thank you guys so much. So I'll see you next time for the sinking then.